thinking about high performance all wrong. Welcome to this episode of Rebellious Ideas. With record levels of burnout, disengagement, quiet quitting, we've seriously got to ask the question. We are revisiting two of our favourite ever podcast episodes. One with Jay Pottenger, GM of EQ Minds, and the other with Dr. Kristy Goodwin, who specialises on neuro-performance. We are really unpacking how do you play on your A game, show up at your best, and really maximise your human potential in 2026. Leveraging science-backed performance techniques and productivity techniques that really are in alignment with our human biology, but without paying the success tax and the burnout price tag that comes. Before we dive into today's conversation, a quick shout out that our cohort for 2026 Rev Up program is about to kick off really soon. If you haven't come across Rev Up, it is our capability pathway for sales and go-to-market teams, where we cover everything from your human performance, negotiation, prospecting, influence, storytelling, AI, you name it, we have got it covered. And we're actually really chuffed that we actually have got Dr. Kristy Goodwin and Jay both available on versions of our Rev Up program. If you want to check that out, there is a link in the show notes for you to explore further. I kind of feel we can't have a conversation about high performance, and Sales Redefined talks about high performance all the time. And I don't think we can have that conversation and it be complete with actually out looking at that mindfulness piece. What do you think are some of the core foundations, core principles to be able to play on your A game, show up at your best and play that big game, whatever that big game is to you?
Yeah, well, if we think of it like athletes, we all know that sort of talent and skill can only take them so far. And likewise, when it comes to work, knowledge and skill and our talent can only take us so far. We also need to have that drive, purpose, and discipline as well in order to reach our full potential. And I think we all need to sort of look at how we do that in order to make sure that we are achieving our best.
And I know your particular sort of area of focus and superpower is around productivity. So I think productivity is an interesting topic in terms of how it's evolved. So if I sort of start with the foundations, if we're going, yep, okay, I need to look at my productivity, I've not necessarily been on my A game there, what would you start to look at as those stepping stones to boost your productivity?
Well, like what we were just talking about, it's making sure that we have those foundations in place, sleep, exercise, nutrition. Without those, you've got no chance of being productive at work. And once you've sort of dialed those into a decent level or to the maximum you can get, then it's looking at what you can do at work when it comes to productivity. And a lot of that, I think, comes to focus. We all have so much external noise at the moment. There's so much cognitive overflow. There's so much information coming at us from all directions. How do we cut through that noise and really focus on what is important for us to be, working on and achieving as well? And so it's really peeling that back and stop trying to do everything and focus on the things that are actually going to help you achieve your goals.
How do you start to put that into practice, particularly when, sometimes it's hard to say no, you don't want to say no, or you feel obliged, or it's hard to delegate? How do you start that journey of focus?
Oh, definitely. So a lot of people have this thing that they have to do everything. And a lot of people have this real fear of saying no because they're going to be letting people down. And when we set up boundaries in our own life, you realize that you're actually saying no to something so that you can give more energy to something else. And sometimes that person that you said no to will actually go off and find a better solution. So you're actually empowering them to look for someone who actually has time, capacity, and the space to actually, invest in this project as much as they want to. I think when it comes to focus, the first thing you should be doing is really utilizing how you use your calendar a lot better. So a lot of people just get to work and the first thing they do is they get reactive. They start answering emails, they're picking up phone calls left and right, and they're not actually focusing on what they want to do. They're focusing on reacting to everyone else's whims and needs. So at the start of the day, get your to-do list. work out what those key priorities are, prioritize them, and then allocate time in your calendar so that you're actually using that time and not pushing it out the back end, and focusing on those things that are important to you and your success.
Are there any other productivity tools that you feel, your clients have really got a lot of benefit from and people should start to think about? Because that email is a great example of just one tool you can have in your kit bag that instantly will help you become more productive.
Yeah, I love, it's an activity called the ruthless prioritization activity. So everyone spends a lot of time planning at the start of the day, right? And they do their to-do list, what's most important. Hopefully they prioritize it. But I've actually done it so at the end of the day, I spend a little bit of time and I review what I did during that day and I look at where I've spent my time. And then I'll actually go, okay, well, I've spent the time correctly or incorrectly. And if it's incorrectly, I'll then make a commitment to myself that I'm not going to do that task for the rest of the week again. And it really opens up a whole heap of time where you realize you've misallocated time, and then take that time and put it towards something that is more important, hopefully your most important task. And so the next day when you arrive at work, you know exactly what you need to do. Rather than spending time planning and all that, you're ready to go. You just jump straight into it. You can block out your calendar and move forward with your day that way. So I think that's a really powerful tool that not a lot of people use at the moment.
How are you defining what's incorrect? Is it, I could have delegated that to somebody else? Is it that probably isn't going to work and deliver a result for our business? Or like, how are you defining that was incorrect for me to do?
Oh, absolutely. So it's just, it all goes back to what am I actually prioritizing on? So if it's not helping me achieve that specific goal or 2 or 3 goals that were my objectives for the day, then it's not seen as an important thing. Now, obviously there's things that pop up that you just have to do. It's life, right? But you will notice really quickly where you've gone, I spent a whole bunch of time working on this thing that hasn't moved the dial at all for me. Or why did I spend time even doing that or considering doing that? That hasn't helped me at all. Once you do it post, it's really easy to recognize where you have misallocated time in your day for sure.
And something that I've watched EQ Minds do that I know you talk about on your socials, and you guys really walk the talk, knowing both of you guys, you really, really walk the talk, is you actually as a company, and I'm hoping you can talk to me about this, as a company, you actually have a timeout. I think it's every 6 weeks and go off the grid so that you do actually reset and not reach that burnout point. Can you talk to us about that? Did I get that right? Or have I?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. We try and plan everything 6 weeks. And usually when people hear about that, they think, oh, that's very indulgent. But it certainly doesn't have to be indulgent. It might just be going away for a long weekend. It might be just literally shutting off the computer for a couple of days straight, turning off the phones, going off grid so that you can hit the reset button. Obviously, if you can get away, go to a retreat or, go somewhere with family or your friends, even better, but it doesn't have to be anything huge. Maybe camping helps you get back on track, whatever it is, just to disconnect from work for a few days so that you can come back fresher, and you will certainly notice the difference, that you have more energy, you have more focus, and you're feeling a lot better about everything that you're doing for sure.
So I want to talk to you about getting started, because I know that a lot of the time, when I read certain things, I go, oh yeah, I must do that. I must do that. And, as all of us know, most of the time we start a new habit and, within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it sort of starts to slip. What are some of the recommendations that you and the EQ Minds team give to people to help actually jumpstart, reset, and go with some of the recommendations we've talked about?
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to starting a new habit, it's all about starting small. So many people decide that, okay, I want to run a marathon, so I'm just going to try and run a marathon straight off. You don't do that. You start by, maybe going for a walk or then running 1K and 3K and 5K. And likewise, when you're building new habits, you need to start really small. So BJ Fogg from Stanford's got a great book, and it's called Tiny Little Habits. And it's just simple ways that you can make small little changes in your life so that you move in the right direction. I'm also a huge believer that your environment plays such a dramatic role in the choices you make. So it can either cause friction or it can reduce friction. And for many of us, we're trying to start to eat healthy. So why do we have bags of chips or chocolates in the cupboard? If that's the case, of course you're going to fail. It's not going to work. So you need to get rid of everything, start fresh, make sure your environment is set up for you to succeed. And likewise, we can apply those same principles when it comes to your office.
So I know that you have a lot of rituals, and we've talked about quite a few things here, whether it's, focus, whether it's setting up your environment for success, whether it's sleep, whether it's exercise, whatever it might be. If you could just have a really, really, really cruel question, you had like a day ahead, and you could only focus on one thing, which one do you think is the most critical to your success? Very cruel question.
That is a tough question. Well, excluding sleep, because sleep is basically the greatest performance enhancer known to man, I would say I'm going to have to go with exercise. Exercise, if you don't do exercise, you're just not feeling at your best. It's the best longevity tool we have. It's the best tool to improve our brain to be able to focus more. It improves your mood. It reduces your stress. Definitely. I'm saying exercise. Exercise should be the first thing that you put in your calendar every single morning when you arrive at work, so that it doesn't get pushed out, so that you can actually spend some time on it.
So many of us are inundated. We know the average adult is processing a whopping 74 gigabytes worth of data professionally and personally every day. It's called infobesity. I often describe it as the emoji of the head exploding. And so it's not about consuming more information and reading about a hack or trying something out. It's about applying research-based solutions. And one of the things that I'm finding working with corporate teams and with one-on-one coaching clients is when we track the impact of some of these micro habits on our performance, we can figure out what exactly works for us. And we're doing this at the moment through some what we call in neurotechnology, through wearable devices, where we can actually track in real time what happens to a person's stress using the technology I use with teams. It's called a Whoop strap. And using a Whoop strap on a person's app, we can firstly see their stress monitor. Now, no person that's stressed needs an app telling them that they're stressed. Let's be honest there. That is not what the purpose of it is. But what we know is that if we can see we're in that red zone, we're in that high stress zone, and sometimes we need to be. Perhaps it's a high stake pitch. Perhaps it is a presentation that you're really hoping will land. Maybe it's writing up this proposal and you're not quite sure which way to go. We are, remember, designed not to shy away from stress, but how do we bring ourselves back to a baseline? Because constantly being in that chronic stress will be detrimental to our physical health, our mental well-being, and our relationships. That's one of those biological constraints. So using this wearable technology, we can look at, hey, when I do those 2 to 3 sighs that Kristy talked about, have a look. I go from being in the high to the low stress zone within a couple of minutes. When I do that 10-minute walk, I grab the dog, I grab the lead, and I quickly walk to the post box and come back. Hey, my stress really drops. Hey, look how bad my stress is when I'm not getting enough sleep. I had no idea about the nexus between, my crappy sleep habits and my poor stress. One of the things I find working with a lot of high achievers is that we know we will feel more stressed, especially if we engage in, really vigorous physical activity. I think that's really obvious. But what comes as a complete surprise to many high performers that I work with and high performing teams is that we grossly underestimate the impact of cognitive stress. The challenging meeting, that pitch that we really had to be on for. With Whoop, you can see in real time not only your stress monitor, you can also see your daily strain. Let me tell you that if I do a keynote on a stage, my strain score is sometimes as high, if not higher, than a 40-minute spin class. So we know, and I think often we underestimate that cognitive mental load. Now, for most of your listeners, we are knowledge workers. We are paid for our mental efforts, our cognitive performance. I think we often think that it's only physical exertion that strains us and stresses us. That mental load that we often carry, and if we want to perform at a high level, we want that prefrontal cortex primed. We have to make sure, and this sort of ties into that third pillar, that we have to effort and recover. Effort and recover. We are not designed to be always on. And, if we think about it, even with our machines and equipment, what do we allow machinery to do in operational plants? Do they have downtime? Do they have maintenance? Do we do upgrades on our phones? Do we power them up? And so we have to start working in these ways that are both at high performance, but in a sustainable capacity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also, you made it the point earlier around the little things. I'm really actively trying to work on that one at the moment, even if it's like round the house, seeing the cup that's lying on the side, rather than just picking it up right now and putting it in the dishwasher, and you leave it, and then 5 times during the day you walk past, oh my God, that cup is still there. Why is that cup still there? Why is that cup still there? Versus just actually going, I'm going to get it off my mental load about a bloody cup. Like it's like you said, trying to eliminate the little things. Or I found at the weekend my son had swimming, and it's always a I don't know other word than shit show trying to get out the door to his swimming. And how do you try and go, right, we're just going to leave 5 minutes earlier so that we're not in that go, we're going to be late. Or same thing, for your meeting or for the podcast or for whatever it is that you're preparing for. Like, I think that's kind of an interesting concept you talked about removing some of the micro stresses.
Yeah, and we have to be aware, especially if you're leading a team. I encourage, when I work with teams, we often do something called a stress audit, and we actually look at a stress audit and a stress manifestation, because every person responds to stress differently and it manifests differently. For some people, it's irritability, it is insomnia, it is digestive issues. For other people, it's what we call emotional blunting. It might be social withdrawal. So this is the challenge, especially for leaders, knowing that each of your colleagues will respond to stress in different ways, and each of them will have different tolerances for stress. What someone sees as a blip on the radar is, for some of your other colleagues, level 10 on the catastrophe scale. And so this becomes really cumbersome. And again, empowering teams to say, this is what you can do at an individual level. And then also as a leader saying, what's within my locus of control, assessing, and this is hard. And I understand in the current economic climate, we're seeing redundancies and pressure to perform, assessing whether we've got manageable workloads. Creating what I call your team's digital guardrails. This is absolutely imperative in light of the right to disconnect legislation that's coming into effect in August 2024. Actually articulating what are your digital norms, practices, and principles as a team, so that your colleagues feel like they can switch off. Do you have, I call it a communication escalation plan, so that if there legitimately is an after hours urgent issue, what's the one mode through which that issue is disseminated to the team, so that people feel like they don't need to be constantly checking emails at night? How do we respond after hours? Because these, I call them our tech expectations. We often have really different tech expectations. And if teams haven't taken the time to co-create, and it's really important, this is not an IT policy that's sort of written and passed down. There has to be some joint agreement and discussion about these digital agreements or guardrails. But coming up with some of those parameters can go a really long way in people feeling like they can switch off. So they're not in these chronic levels of stress all of the time, because we know stress produces cortisol. Cortisol inhibits neural pathways. So you just simply cannot perform at your peak when you are stressed. We know that instead of energy being directed in that prefrontal cortex that I was talking about, we activate our amygdala. That's the worry center of our brain. So we really need to do whatever we can at an individual level, but also collectively, how can we manage that team stress? And we've all been in situations, I don't know if you have, Abby, where we've got one stressed colleague and it has such a quick contagion effect. So from a performance perspective, trying to bolster that capacity to deal with stress at an individual and collective level is absolutely critical.
And this is what I love about what you're talking about. Not only is it science-backed, not only is it practical and it's micro, and it's achievable. And I often have you in my head. It's like, it's only 40 seconds out. But I also like the fact that we're not just talking about, oh, look after your team's well-being because it's like, you know, the right thing to do. And it is the right thing to do, but it's more than that. It's actually going for your team to operate at peak performance, for you to grow, for you to achieve growth, for you to grow your sales, for the team to actually perform. We actually have to look at how do we get the most out of, you know, your most expensive a lot of the time and best asset being your people. And that's what I kind of like about the shift in the angle of what you're talking about with human performance, and therefore how human performance is driving business performance and real hard outcomes.
Yeah. And I'm often asked, you know, do you lead with well-being or do you lead with performance? I actually think the two are inextricably linked. And so when we start to work the way we are neurobiologically designed, when we work in harmony with our human operating system, the well-being takes care of itself and we continue to drive that sustainable performance. It's not about doing more. It's about, as I said before, and I feel like I'm trying to sell you something here, it's about working smarter, not harder. It's about working the way we are designed, because it does not matter what app, what productivity system you've got, what hack you've read about. The harsh reality is we have to work the way we are designed. There's no shortcuts. There's no way we can outperform our HOS. So it's about knowing that. And then also, I think, not just knowing our HOS, but knowing how do we map particularly our digital ways of working and living, so that it works with that rather than against it as well.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Kristy Goodwin and Jay Pottenger. If you want to get access to a lot of their resources, they both share resources publicly available on their websites, and the links are in the show notes. As I mentioned, we are super lucky to have both of them as RevUp experts. So if you want to check out the RevUp 2026 programs, the link is in the show notes. And finally, we have got so many amazing podcast episodes coming your way, so don't forget to subscribe so you are the first to receive each episode.